Good day. I am Robert Ezra Park, one of the pioneering figures of American sociology and the architect of what came to be known as the Chicago School of Sociology. Welcome to Socio-Exploration. In this video, I'll walk you through the key moments of my life, the foundations of my sociological thinking, and how I helped turn cities, and especially Chicago, into a living laboratory for social science. I was born on February 14, 1864, in Harveyville, Pennsylvania, and raised in the frontier-like towns of Minnesota. Early on, I was fascinated by stories, movement, and the human condition. I completed my bachelor's degree at the University of Michigan in 1887, where I studied under the influential philosopher John Dewey. But rather than pursue a quiet academic life, I became a journalist. For more than a decade, I wrote from Chicago, Detroit, Denver, and New York, often reporting on urban problems, race relations, and crime. It was during these years that I saw sociology not just as theory, but as a tool for understanding the world around us, especially the dynamic and often chaotic life of American cities. My formal sociological training began later. I studied philosophy and sociology in Germany, where I was influenced by Georg Simmel, and then returned to the U.S. to complete my Ph.D. at Harvard University under Franklin H. Giddings. But I never lost my journalist's eye or my passion for the real-world problems that sociology could help solve. In the early 1900s, I became a close associate of Booker T. Washington, working at Tuskegee Institute, where I researched issues of race, migration, and the struggles of African Americans in the post-slavery South. This experience deeply shaped my sociological imagination and commitment to studying marginalized communities. In 1914, I joined the University of Chicago, and it was there that my career and my influence truly blossomed. Along with colleagues like Ernest W. Burgess, I helped establish the Chicago School of Sociology, a groundbreaking movement that focused on urban life, ethnography, immigration, deviance, and social disorganization. We viewed the city as a social organism, and sociology as a science that must go to the streets, not just stay in classrooms. My students fanned out across Chicago with notebooks and questions, documenting the lives of gangs, immigrants, factory workers, and marginalized groups. They were not just theorizing. They were witnessing sociology in action. This fieldwork approach transformed the discipline and remains influential to this day. One of my central ideas was that human behavior is shaped by the environment, particularly the rapid social changes brought by urbanization. I studied race relations, collective behavior, and the ways people form identities in crowded, complex societies. I believed that if we wanted to understand the city, we had to understand how people moved, adapted, communicated, and struggled to belong. I retired in 1936, but my influence continued through the work of my students and the many departments that adopted our methods. On February 7, 1944, I passed away in Nashville, Tennessee, just a week shy of my 80th birthday. Though I may not have received the early fame of European theorists, my legacy is etched in the very practice of sociology itself, especially in the way we study cities, race, media, and migration. As a sociologist trained in journalism and shaped by real-world observation, I believe that society must be studied where it lives, in the streets, neighborhoods, and everyday lives of people. My theories were not developed in isolation, but born from the crowded cities, diverse communities, and ongoing social tensions I encountered. These ideas aim to explain how people interact, how cities function, how racial groups adapt, and how collective behavior shapes our world. 1. The city as a social laboratory. Cities, to me, were like giant experiments in human interaction. I believed that cities, especially fast-growing urban centers like Chicago, offered sociologists a unique opportunity to study how people from different backgrounds live, adapt, and often struggle together. In cities, social change happens quickly, and issues like crime, migration, poverty, and diversity are concentrated. That's why I encourage students to observe real life directly, by walking neighborhoods, talking to residents, and studying life as it happens. This approach made the Chicago school famous and showed that cities are not just places, they're processes. 2. Human ecology and urban zones. I helped develop the idea that cities grow and change in patterns similar to ecosystems in nature. We notice that people and groups tend to settle in certain zones based on income, culture, or opportunity. For example, the city center might be for business, while immigrants or the poor often live in nearby crowded zones. As people become more stable, they often move further out. We called this concentric zone theory, and it helped explain how space, competition, and environment shape urban life. Like plants competing for sunlight, people compete for space, jobs, and safety. 3. Race relations cycle. Based on my work with Booker T. Washington and my study of different ethnic and racial communities, I noticed a pattern in how groups relate to each other over time. I called this the race relations cycle, which has 4 stages. 1. Contact, when different groups first meet. 2. Competition, when they compete for jobs, housing, or resources. 3. Accommodation, when they learn to live side by side. 4. Assimilation, when the minority group begins to blend into the mainstream society. This cycle doesn't always happen perfectly, and sometimes it stops at conflict. But it offered a helpful way to understand immigration, racism, and cultural change. 4th, social disorganization theory. In fast-changing cities, traditional communities often break down. Families become disconnected, neighborhoods lose trust, and institutions like schools or churches become weak. This creates a state of social disorganization, where rules are unclear and crime or deviant behavior can rise. I believed that people weren't bad by nature, but when society's normal supports fail, it becomes easier to go off track. This idea helped sociologists and criminologists understand why certain areas face more problems than others. 5. Collective behavior and public opinion. I was deeply interested in how crowds behave, how people act in protests, and how public opinion is shaped by media and events. I called this collective behavior, moments when people act together, often in unpredictable or emotional ways. I studied how rumors spread, how social movements grow, and how media affects what people believe. I warned that in modern democracies, public opinion is powerful, but must be guided by truth and discussion, not emotion or manipulation. Over the years, I wrote not just as a scholar, but as someone deeply engaged with the living realities of modern life. My aim was to make sociology practical, to connect it with the issues of the day: immigration, urban change, race relations, and collective behavior. My work often began in the field, among people, in the heart of the city, and it returned to the page only after careful observation. Let me walk you through some of my most significant publications and the ideas they carry. 1. The City. Suggestions for the Investigation of Human Behavior in the Urban Environment, 1915. In this foundational essay, I laid the intellectual groundwork for what would become urban sociology. I argued that the city is not just a place but a social experiment in action, a stage where new ways of living, competing, and adapting emerge. I called for the study of the urban environment as a dynamic and structured setting shaped by human interactions. This was the beginning of our vision of the city as a social laboratory, a place where sociologists could observe how social life evolves under pressure. 2. Introduction to the Science of Sociology, 1921, with Ernest W. Burgess. This textbook was more than just a guide. It was a manifesto for a new kind of sociology. In it, we provided both theoretical frameworks and real-life case studies that helped students and researchers understand how to do fieldwork. We organized material into major sociological themes: social interaction, conflict, social control, and group behavior. It was a landmark in American sociology and helped establish the Chicago School as a leader in empirical social research. 3. The Immigrant Press and Its Control, 1922. Here, I turned my attention to immigrant communities and the role of ethnic newspapers in shaping their identities. I examined how immigrant press outlets served as both cultural anchors and vehicles for assimilation. But I also explored how these newspapers could be used by dominant groups to influence, monitor, or control immigrant populations. This work was one of the first to link media, culture, and power in the study of minority groups. 4. Race and Culture, 1950, posthumous. This collection of essays brought together my most important writings on race relations, cultural conflict, and social adaptation. I expanded on my idea of the race relations cycle: contact, competition, accommodation, and assimilation, and discussed how race is not just biological, but deeply social and cultural. I argued that racial conflict arises when social structures fail to adapt to demographic and cultural changes. This work helped lay the foundation for ethnic studies and critical race sociology. 5. The Crowd and the Public and Other Essays, 1972, posthumous. In these essays, I examined how groups form, how crowds behave, and how public opinion is created and influenced. I was especially interested in how people act differently in a collective setting than as individuals. I looked at the psychology of the crowd, the role of media, and the dangers of manipulated public discourse. In a democracy, I believed, a thoughtful and informed public is vital, but it must be protected from distortion and propaganda. I believed that to understand society, you must enter it, walk its streets, meet its people, and listen to their stories. Sociology, at its best, is not abstract. It's alive. It grows from real life and speaks to real problems. If my work lives on, let it be, because it helped us see the world not just as it is, but as it might become, with compassion, understanding, and social responsibility. Do like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more sociological explorations. Thank you, and have a great day.